Good morning. Sunday, June 26th, 2022. My name is Douglas Griffin. I like to call this the unbiased word because I'm attempting to go through the Bible verse by verse and have a less biased view of what the verses mean when you see them in context. And so we're reading through the book of Genesis right now on Sundays. On Wednesday nights, I'm in the New Testament in the book of John. And in Exodus, God is saying, I'm finally at the point where I'm going to be able to fulfill my promise. And not because God wasn't able before, like literally able, but because the Jewish people weren't ready. The people, it could have been anybody. They weren't ready. Though they were complaining, gosh, it's like having a job that you complain about or something. Well, you should quit. And you go, nah, but you're complaining all the time. I know, but so although they were complaining about the Egyptians, they didn't really want to leave Egypt because there was nothing out there in their mind for them. Their forefathers, Abraham had a little plot of land, but 400,000 people couldn't live on it. Uh, Jacob, Abraham, Isaac didn't really have any land. He had a couple wells. Jacob had a little bit of land. But they knew if they had to go back to the promised land, they'd have to fight. And they were not prepared for that. So it's easy for them to stay in Egypt. God was ready to bring them out. And he actually was waiting for them to be ready to leave. So he worked it out that Pharaoh would increase the bondage to the point where they would finally be ready to leave, which is not usually how it's taught. It's usually that God was just reading a magazine and suddenly went, oh my God, 200 years have gone by. What was I thinking? But that's not what happened. He really was just waiting on the people. Okay, so I'm in Exodus chapter 6. He makes 7 promises. We went over 4 of them last week. I'm just going to review those 4, go on to the next 3, and then go on to the next part. So he says, I will bring you out. Well, what verse does this start on? I guess it doesn't matter. Promise number 1, I will bring you out. Okay, that's 7. Okay, so this must be verse 6, Egypt. Exodus 6:6. And number 1 promise, I will bring you out from under the burdens of the Egyptians. So there's 7 promises he makes. We went over 4 of them last week because they use those 4 promises in the Jewish Passover. These 4 promises in there. There's 4 glasses of wine that they serve during the meal. God instituted the Passover. Christians have converted it into communion. And actually there's a part of that meal the part that Jesus says, this part, I want you to understand this is about me, this particular part of the Passover. So that's the part that we do. But God instituted the whole thing. I'm all for doing the whole thing. So they use these 4 promises, and I put them in context last week because I wanted us to understand what was going on when Jesus was going through, because Jesus had the Passover supper with his disciples. So promise number 1, I will bring you out from under the burdens of the Egyptians. They have their wine. This is the first part of the Passover feast that Jesus went through. Hey, Rodney. Oh, Lord. How do I stop that? Okay. My mother's birthday is today. Well, actually, her birthday's on Wednesday, but we're celebrating it today. So I'm just kidding. I've been getting calls all morning. That's why I was late. I apologize. So now let me go back to promise. So they have the Kiddush. They start off with a glass of wine, which is the sanctification. So I'm going to bring you out from under the burdens that you've been burdened by the Egyptians. First, I'm going to lift that burden. You're still in Egypt, but at least I'm lifting the burden. And I'm claiming it as my own. They have 4 glasses of wine, but there's 3 pieces of bread. And they break the middle bread, so now there's 4 pieces of bread, right? 4 glasses of wine, 3 pieces of bread. They do the yachus, and they break the middle piece of unleavened bread, so now there's 4. And then the bitter herbs are put out. Then they tell the story of the Passover. This is what happened. We were in Egypt because God said, tell the story so that you'll remember. It's important to remember, especially when we get down to Promise 5, 6, and 7. He said, Promise number 2, I will rescue you from their bondage. So I lift it, and now I'm going to rescue you from it so it doesn't fall back on you. So that's when they do the Machut, where the second glass of wine is poured, because they're thinking, well, how did God rescue us? Oh, he poured out judgment on the Egyptians, and that's how he did it. So they say, this is the cup of judgment. Jesus identifies the third cup as the cup of judgment, but they say this is the cup of judgment. And then they read from Exodus, where it says that the lamb is to be slain, etc. So they read instructions. So first they do the story of the Passover, and now they read an actual verse. Then they are thankful for what he did. They do the Dayenu. Dayenu. It would have been enough. If God had simply just lifted our burdens, it would have been enough. If he'd rescued us, it would have been enough. If he just parted the Red Sea, it would have been enough. If he done, it would have been enough. It's a prayer of gratefulness as opposed, because we like to sing, "What have you done for me lately?" But they're like, no, look what God has done, and it's important. Like, and God loves doing more for us. But we need to be grateful for what he's done and not say, well, Lord, come on, Lord, snap to it. Today's a new day. Get on your job. Like, if that's all you ever, if you never did anything else for me, and of course you will, I could just shout and praise God all day long because look what you've done for me in the past. So they do the Dayenu. It would have been enough. Then they eat the Passover supper. So they've got 2 glasses of wine, one of thanks, one of judgment. Now they eat the Passover supper, which Jesus did with his disciples. Then they eat the unleavened bread. At this point in John 13, verse 26, Jesus had said, so they ate the supper, and after supper, he said, one of you is going to betray me. And who is it? Who is it? And Peter says to John, ask him who it is. Because, again, they're laying on one elbow, they're laying on the side, and John leans back, says he leaned on Jesus' breast, but because they're all laying in a row. So he leans back and asks him, and Jesus says, it is he to whom I'm going to give this piece of bread. When I have dipped it, I'm going to dip it because it's hard. It's unleavened bread. It's like a cracker. I'm going to dip it in the juice. And having dipped the bread, he gave it to Judas. So he's passing it on. He's the first person he had to do. Judas is right on his side. And Judas is in Jesus' ear. You should be really doing this. You should be doing that. You should be doing that. But Jesus knows what he's supposed to be doing. But Judas is doing that on purpose. Judas has a plan for Jesus, like we always have a plan for God. God, you should do this, this, and this. God's like, thank you so much for that. That really helped me out. But I'm going to do what I want to do all along. So Judas is trying to get Jesus to overthrow the government, and Jesus is like, I'm going to overthrow Satan's kingdom by getting on the cross. Then he turns to Judas at this point in the meal, 2 glasses of wine. He's passing the bread after the meal and says, do quickly what you have to do. Judas leaves. And he makes his deal for the 30 pieces of silver and that whole thing, and then says, I know where they're going later on tonight, because Jesus has already announced, we're going to go to the Garden of Gethsemane. Normally, he didn't tell them where they were going, but he wanted Judas to know. So Judas went out, I can bring you to him. At that point, Jesus is eating the bitter herbs at that point, because it was the bread and then the bitter herbs, because he knows what Judas is doing. Then they have the blessing after the meal. We thank you for what we've just eaten. So in Luke 22, verse 19, it says, and he took the bread, he gave thanks, he broke it, he gave it to them, saying, this is my body, which is given for you. Do this in remembrance of me. So so now that they have all had a piece of bread, they haven't eaten the bread yet. They just all have some in their hand. They've all broken a piece, right? They've all broken here. They pass it on, they broke a piece, everybody's broken a piece. So Jesus says, this is my body, broken for you. See how you're each getting some? You each get some of my body. take this now, and now we're going to eat. So everybody didn't eat until everyone had broken off a piece. It says, promise number 3, I will redeem you with an outstretched arm and with great judgments. And now they eat, they drink the third cup. Remember, there were 4 cups. And we're going over all 7 promises. I'm just reviewing. So I lifted the burdens, I rescued you, and then I'm going to redeem you. And that's when he brings them out of Egypt, and they cross the water. They face death because they really had to face death. There's an ocean with the walls of water on either side that could come and crash them down, and they had to say, okay, we surrender our lives. We give our lives. We're just going to give our lives and trust. And so that's a type of what happens when we're saved. I'm just surrendering my life, and I'm trusting. And that water baptism is a type of our death to our old self and our being alive to God, right? So Jesus takes this third cup, which they just called the cup of blessing, cup of redemption, and he makes a point with it. In Matthew chapter 26, verse 27, it says, then he took the cup and he gave thanks, the third cup, and gave it to them, saying, drink from it, all of you. You guys drink. I'm not drinking. For this is my blood of the new covenant. That bread we just ate, I told you that's my body. Now this is the blood of the new covenant, which is shed for many for the remission of sins. But I'm saying to you, I will not drink of the fruit of the vine from now on until the day when I drink it new with you. I can't drink this cup yet, because this is actually symbolizing my blood that's going to be shed. So my blood is about to be shed, and then that's kind of the third cup. And then I'll drink the fourth cup with you in heaven. Okay, so for this is my blood of the new covenant, which is shed for many for the remission of sins. But I say to you, I will not drink of the fruit of the vine, not now on until the day when I drink it new with you in my Father's kingdom. Promise 4, I will take you as my people and I will be your God. So now you're on the other side of the Red Sea. You've crossed over, and now I'm going to bring you to my holy mountain and claim you as my people. So that's when God comes down off the mountain and says, you're a peculiar people. You're separate. I'm claiming you now. There's no one like you on the earth because everyone else serves these other gods. When you become a Christian, when you give your life to God, when you're Jewish, there's no one like us because we're serving the true God. The other people, they're serving idols, or they're serving money, or they're serving gang members or something. They're serving, but they're not serving God. So at the foot of the mountain, they had the opportunity to say yes. And so they drink their fourth cup during the Passover. Jesus didn't drink cup 3 or 4. But it says that they sang a hymn and went out after this. So they all drank some, and they went out like singing, like, hey, what they're singing. Okay, Matthew 26:30. And when they had sung a hymn, they went out to the Mount of Olives. What they sing is Psalm 136, verses 1 through just 16. It goes on to 32 verses something, but verses 1 through 16. So give thanks to the Lord, for he is good, for his mercy endures forever. They're just singing this. Oh, give thanks to the God of gods, for his mercy endures forever. Oh, give thanks to the Lord of lords, for his mercy endures forever. So Jesus is actually leading it, and they're chanting back, for his mercy endures forever, because it's his feast. He's the host. It's not at his house, but whoever owned the house, some people think it was Joseph and Arimathea, allowed Jesus to host this Passover Seder the night before the actual Passover. Because he's saying, tomorrow I am going to be Passover lamb. So I want to have this Passover with you now. To him who struck Egypt with their firstborn, who brought out Israel from among them, who with a strong hand and with an outstretched arm, to him who divided the Red Sea in two. And that's when they thought they were going to die. That's when they said, we need to go back because we're just about to die. And he's like, yes, face your death and go forward. You need to die, but die to yourself and die to always talking back to me. I wish you would die to all that stuff. And he says, it made Israel pass through the midst of the Red Sea and overthrew Pharaoh and his army in the Red Sea. Promise 5. So we just reviewed the first 4. That you shall know that I'm the Lord your God who brings you out from under the burdens of the Egyptians. So you're going to finally understand that I am Jehovah Elohim. And this is I taught before, whenever he's talking about using the name Jehovah, that's when he's identifying himself as the promise keeper. He says, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob didn't know me. They heard that name. They used that name Jehovah, but the promise weren't kept. I made promises to them, but they never saw them kept. You get to know me as Jehovah, that you will know that I am Jehovah. I am someone who keeps their promises. You're going to actually see the answers done right in front of you. And from now on, you'll know, oh, he keeps his promises. Abraham and them are taking in faith. You're going to see it right in front of your eyes. So you're going to know that when I say something, I'm going to do it. And that's what we have to believe, that God doesn't just say, because we probably know a lot of people in our lives who just say things and it's not going to happen. Oh yeah, I'll come to see that. Or oh sure, I'll contribute to that a little bit later. Never happens, right? So God, we need to know Him as a promise keeper, so that when we find a promise in the Bible, or a Bible in the promise, but when we find a promise in the Bible that God has made, we go, well, He's going to keep this. He's going to keep this. And maybe you want to claim that for yourself. See where it says that He's a healer and heals all the diseases? Okay, Lord, I'm going to claim this because I know you as a promise keeper. See where it says you deliver me from my enemies? Well, my enemies are after me right now, and I believe that you're going to deliver me because you promised you do that, and I know you as a promise keeper. So we can look, when we read through the Bible, sometimes a particular verse will stick out to us. That's not coincidence. And it's God's making us aware of certain things, certain promises He's made, and He wants us to know Him as Jehovah. So He says to them that you will know that I'm Jehovah, Elohim. You need to know that, but you won't know that until I bring you to the mountain. And then you can turn around and see the Red Sea and see where Egypt was and go, oh, now I know you in a different way. We heard stories about you, but now I know you, who brings you out from under the burdens of the Egyptians. So in the 136th Psalm, they get to, 136th Psalm, verse 16 is, to him who led his people through the wilderness, for his mercy endureth forever. And they kind of, for the Passover, they stopped there because they've made it through. Now they're in the wilderness, and the rest of it they don't think pertains to Passover. But interestingly enough, God made 7 promises. They just take the first 5, and they think the other 3 will be fulfilled someday. Well, we believe they've been fulfilled, that God has revealed Himself as Jehovah. His 6th promise, He says, I will bring you into the land which I swore to give Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. So in the psalm, they've come out of Egypt and they're standing at the mountain, and now they're just going to kind of wander in the wilderness. But God says, and I am going to bring you in. Interestingly enough, there's 3 types of people that God is speaking to. There are the Jews that have been in Egypt, that were born there. They weren't born in Canaan. They're Egyptians. They're Egyptians. They've learned the Egyptian culture. They speak Egyptian, which is too bad because Egypt has at that time, had a death culture. They believed that this life was temporary, kind of what we believe, but that the afterlife is what you should be preparing for. Prepare for death. You're just here temporarily. Prepare for death. We're preparing for life, and we know we have something to do while we're here. We're not just waiting around. But everything they did was based on death. They built great pyramids, and those pyramids are just huge tombs. And so God is trying to introduce them to life. I've got to kind of brainwash you. So you people who were born in Egypt and that's all you've known your whole life, you're not going to really make it. Then they're going to be the people who spend most of their life in the wilderness. You didn't spend most of your life in Egypt, but you're spending most of your life in the wilderness. So I have a certain relationship with you. There's those of you who know me as the God from Egypt. You're angry at me because your lives were hard. Those of you who know me as the God in the wilderness, you think I'm just this repetitive God who doesn't really take you anywhere. But there are those of you who are born in the wilderness, not in Egypt, born in the wilderness, who are going to go over into the promised land. So there's 3 people who spent the majority of their life in Egypt and died quickly in the wilderness, people who spent a little bit of their life in Egypt, but the majority of it, 40 years in the wilderness and died. And then the people who were born there in the wilderness, but they got to go over. They don't know those Egyptian ways of death. They see a cloud all day and fire at night. So they see God every single day. So it's not hard for them to believe that when they cross over, that God's going to do something, because they see him every day. Those who were in Egypt, they were just, those who were born and raised in Egypt, they're just worried about their next meal. And we just see these bricks that we have to do every day. So you talk about God, but yeah, whatever. So God's making promises kind of in phases. We tend to look at these as one set of promises for one people, but they're really promises for a different group. So he says, I'm going to bring you, that last group, into the land in which I swore to give to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. The previous group, you're going to finally know me because you're going to see me every day. But still, you still have too much Egypt in you. And that's why we want to get all the Egypt out of us. But this group, you've seen my works. You see me every day. You've seen manna come down. You know I'm real. You'll have enough faith to go over the mountains and into the promised land. And when I say attack those Philistines or attack Jericho, you'll believe me. Those other people won't believe me. And this is borne out in the fact that God did all those incredible miracles in Egypt and rained down locusts and turned the rivers to blood. And they went, yeah, that's nice. But when they got to the Red Sea, they're like, oh, well, God can't handle that. And they just believe, because we put God in a box sometimes. We delimit what we think God can do, what he's concerned about. And they just believe God's only concerned with Egypt things. Now that we're facing this Red Sea, God can't handle that. And so that's just sometimes how we've been raised. Some people have gotten news about a cancer or this or that, and they think to themselves, God can't handle that. And it just depends how you've been raised. We've got to fight that. We want to go from being Egyptian people to being wilderness people where we're seeing God work. But then we want to be those promised land people where we know he's going to work. When God says, move, we go. When God says, I'm going to heal you, we go, yeah, I'm ready for it. And we just believe. Okay, so I'll bring you into the land, promise number 6, which I swore to give to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. So in that 136 Psalms, where they only quote the first part in the Passover, it says, he slew famous kings. He slew Zion, king of the Amorites, and Og, king of Bashan. And these were the last 2 kings standing in their way before they crossed over into the promised land. Promise 7, and I will give it to you as a heritage, for I am Jehovah. So not only bringing you in the land, but it's going to belong to you. Because it's one thing I could probably get in the door of some Beverly Hills home, but it's not mine just because I made it in the door. So there's a difference between making it to the promised land and actually feeling like you own it. And so they had to believe. God says, I've given it to you. I've already given it to you. So you need to walk differently. And that would be that's like slipping into the Beverly Hills home, sneaking in the door, but seeing your name and seeing pictures of you and go, oh my God, you mean this is my, because you can still feel like a stranger somewhere. And God wants us to feel ownership of the promises that he's made. Not that, well, I'll see, it's like, no, if God has given this thing to me. God puts visions in everybody's hearts of things that he's going to do for them individually. We do not all have the same visions, but it may be a career choice that God puts in your heart, or a specific person, or something, an activity or something. And he wants us to know, I've given that to you. And you're going to act differently when you know that you own that thing, that it's yours, that God has given it to you. So I'm going to bring you into the land as promise 6. But promise 7 is that I'm going to give it to you as a heritage so that you'll know that it's yours. And that's when he told Joshua, everywhere the foot of your feet go, know that I've given that to you. If I have you step over there, that's yours. Well, it doesn't look like mine. It doesn't feel like mine. It's too bad. I've already seen the future where you're living there. So it's just a new mentality that God was slowly trying to get in them. All right. Uh, so Moses spoke thus to the children of Israel. This is verse 9. But they did not heed Moses. He said, so everything God told him, tell them I'm Jehovah. He told them the 7 promises, and they went, no, sorry. Which is the opposite of how they'd been a week ago. A week ago, Moses came down. He did some things for them. Here, look at this rod, because they were doubtful then. But then the rod turned to a snake, and they went, "Ooh, we're like the snake. We're doubting. We shouldn't doubt." And then he did the leprosy thing. Okay, it's like leprosy. We shouldn't doubt, because every time they doubted him, that's when God didn't just, "Hey, come here. I got some tricks for you." Wait until they doubt. If they doubt, then do this. So the miracles were specifically addressing their doubt. And so then they believed. Then Moses goes to Pharaoh and everything goes bad. So now when he goes back and say, here's what God said he's going to do, it's like, we don't believe it. Even though you're the same God who did all that for me, things have changed, God, and so we don't believe you anymore. So they did not heed Moses because of anguish of spirit is how the King James translated. It's shortness of breath. It's which sometimes they'll translate it impatience. You have that short breath. So sometimes they translate shortness of breath. Here they translated anguish in their spirit. But other places it's literally translated impatience because they're impatient with God now. They're like, come on, God. We just So I want to read this section in Job to you where they translated impatience because it's very interesting. It says, well, to set it up, we all know Job, that he was actually very wealthy and had everything going for them. And then one day everything went wrong. The book of Job is like 10 days long total. We think like he got this horribly cursed life. But the entire book of Job is just 10 days. And then after day 11, Job had a great life again. So maybe we've all been there. We've had 10 bad days in a row. Okay, but day 11 is coming. So his friends, we call them Job's comforters, came to him and said, look how everything is going bad in your life. It's got to be your fault. Because that's how we judge people. And that's how they teach God some places. God, everything should go perfect now that you're a Christian, which never happened that way in the Bible. So they just said, it's got to be your fault. And Job is fighting, no, it's not my fault. It's not my fault. It's not my fault. So someone has just said, wicked people get punished. Bad things happen to wicked people, and good things happen to good people. So therefore, you must be wicked. So Job says, I beg to differ. I think it's like Job 29, verse 1. It says, then Job answered and said, listen carefully to my speech, and let this be your consolation. Like, really take this in. Bear with me that I may speak, because I have a little bit to say here. And after I've spoken, then you can keep on mocking me. But just for a minute, just listen. Verse 4 says, as for me, is my complaint against man? If it were, why should I not be impatient? That's that same word that says the children of Israel were impatient with God. You could have translated short of breath, but it wouldn't have made sense. I'm short of breath. He wasn't short of breath. He was impatient now. His time had run out, and that's what it was. He says, so you're saying I'm frustrated with men, you 3 comforters who are here? Okay, why shouldn't I be impatient? He goes on to say, verse 5, look at me and be astonished, and just put your hand over your mouth, because he's been righteous his whole life. So look at my situation. Even when I remember, I'm terrified and trembling takes hold of my flesh. When I remember what I used to have and what I'm going through now. But he takes up, as far as we're talking about the wicked, he says, why do the wicked live and become old? Yeah, they become mighty and powerful. Job's saying, I know some wicked people who live to a good old age, and they're definitely wicked and powerful. So don't tell me that if something bad is happening, that means that you're wicked, because I've seen wicked people who are having this great life. So he says, their descendants are established with them in their sight. So they have kids, they have grandkids. He says, and their offspring before their eyes. Their houses are safe from fear. Neither is the rod of God upon them. Now, this is Job's opinion. He's saying, I don't see God punishing them. I don't see them going through that. There's some wealthy, wicked, evil people. They're, head of corporations, in office, they, whatever. He says their bull breeds without failure. So they're prospering. He says their calves without miscarriage. They send forth their little ones like a flock, and their children dance. They sing to the tambourines of harp and rejoice to the sound of the flute. They spend their days in wealth, and in a moment they go down to the grave. He says, and then suddenly they're just dead, and then they're gone. They don't suffer for I have a long sickness. So in Job's mind, that you live this incredible life, and then just in a moment you're dead and gone, and so that's the best life. Just had a great time, and then boom, no lingering sickness. He says, when they say to God, depart from us, for we do not desire the knowledge of your ways. So they're telling God, get out of here. I don't need anything about you. He says, who is the Almighty that we should serve? And this is also what they're saying. Who's the Almighty that we should serve him? And what profit do we have if we pray to him? So Job says, indeed, their prosperity is not in their hand. The counsel of the wicked is far from me. He says, I don't understand. In truth, their prosperity is not because of what they've done. God is allowing them to prosper. God did not come upon them and go, uh-oh, what happened? How'd you become rich? Hey, somebody messed up. He says, you guys are making up some idea that poor people must be evil and rich people must be good because all people who are rich must be. And I know some wicked rich people. I know some very righteous, very good poor people. So don't make up some rule and look at my life and assume I am wicked just because I'm suffering right now. No. He says, and I says, I don't even get them. They're prosperous and God's allowed it. So I says, their counsel is far from me. How often is the lamp of the wicked put out? Now, this is Job complaining now because his friends have been on him for 21 chapters. They've been on him. Oh, yeah, this is chapter. Is this 29 or 21? Anyway, so he says, how often is their lamp put out? How often does their destruction come upon them? Now, obviously, there are wicked people who suffer and stuff. But Job's trying to make a point. How you've seen wicked and I haven't seen them snuffed out. He says, they're like straw before the wind. I haven't seen them really hurt very much. This calamity just blows by them. They're like shaft that the storm carries away. They say, is what you say, God lays up one iniquity for his children. Let him recompense him that he may know it. So, okay, maybe they're not suffering, but their children are going to get it. Well, I've seen some seniors who were horrible people and some juniors who were prospering on their dad's seniorness. And, so he says that doesn't hold true. He says, let his eyes see his destruction and let him drink the wrath of the Almighty. So it's going to be their kids that suffer. And for what does he care? What does he care about his household after him? When he's dead, he's not going to care. And I can think of some rich people now who, when they're gone, they're not going to care if their children have to pay for all their stuff now and all their sins. Like, I'm out of here. So he's like, they won't care? Like, that's on them. For what does he care about his household after him when the number of his months is cut in half? Can anyone teach God's knowledge since he judges those on high? So do you think you know what God, and this is where Job was still in the bounds. God didn't show up and say, okay. He says, can anyone teach God knowledge since he judges those on high? You don't know what God is thinking. One dies, these wicked, they die in full strength, being wholly at ease and secure, the ones that he's thinking of. His pails are full of milk and the marrow of his bones is moist and like he's still flexible. Another man dies in the bitterness of his soul, never having eaten with pleasure. So I've seen some wicked people live good a long time, and I've seen some other people who've never been happy, and yet I know they're righteous. They lie down, but you know what? They do lay down alike in the dust, and worms cover them. Look, I know your thoughts. Job is saying, I know what you're thinking. And this is his impatience, and he's starting to get impatient with God because he's having to keep defending himself where these guys are saying, something must be wrong with you because you're going through bad stuff. And that's not how it works. Okay. Look, I know your thoughts and the schemes with which you wrong me. Verse 28. For you say, where's the house of the prince? And where is his tent? The dwelling place of the wicked. So look at, that prince and look at the wicked. And I'm looking at you. He says, have you not asked those who travel the road? And do you not know their signs? For the wicked are reserved for the day of doom. So this is what you're saying. Okay, you may look at the wicked and see how well they're doing, but the wicked are then reserved for the day of judgment. So maybe their kids don't get it, maybe they live okay. They shall be brought out on the day of wrath. Who condemns his way to his face, and who repays him for what he has done? Yet he shall be brought to the grave, and a vigil kept over the tomb. The clods of the valley shall be sweet to him. Everyone shall follow this wicked person, as countless have gone before him. How then can you comfort me with empty words? You're not really making I'm suffering right now, and you're assuming it's because I am bad. Now, at this point, Job still hasn't given up his faith. The Egyptians, they've let it go. God has shown up and said, I'm going to rescue you. And Moses goes in and things get worse for them. And they're through with God. They're done. They breathe out that little breath. And Moses delivers the message. God says, I'm Jehovah. And I don't want to hear that. From God, who just last week was doing all these miracles in their midst. They're done because they're suffering now. And we don't want to be like that. Once things get a little hard, I'm giving up on God. So Job still hasn't, but he's walking that thin line because his comforters are starting to get on his nerve. How can you comfort me with empty words since falsehood remains in your answers? So you're looking at me and saying, you must have done something. Now, just as a little preview of Job, they keep pressing him. And they say, there must be something wrong. There must be something wrong. And sometimes there's not. The Jews in Egypt were suffering, but that was part of God's plan. Things got worse because he needed it to get so bad that he could bring them out. But he was always praying on bringing them out. Just because things got worse doesn't mean that God's plan isn't working. So we can't always look at that. You can pray, Lord, I believe in my healing, and then go to the doctor and it gets a worse report than the previous week. That doesn't mean God's plan is not working. That doesn't mean the Egyptians laid on heavy bond. You don't know what God is doing, but he can't help but fulfill his promises. So we can't just give up on God just because we prayed and things got a little worse. So this is what they're doing to Job. They're like pressuring him. And here's where Job messes up. Because they said, somebody's got to be at fault. And Job says, well, it's got to be God at fault because it's not me. So that's when God eventually shows up and says, all right, let's have a talk. I'm not messing up. Just because you don't know the entirety of the plan doesn't mean I've messed up. And we don't know the entirety of God's plan. Let's not give up on God because things seem to be getting worse. That doesn't mean that there's not a reason for it. And in the end, we go, oh, now I see why that happened that way. Let's not give up in the middle. If God said it, he's going to do it. So if you pray and it got even worse. So that doesn't mean that, and I don't mean that flippantly. Well, it got worse, big deal. I know that it hurts. It hurts that things got worse. But that doesn't mean that God is off the job. Okay. So, in fact, so here's what they say to Moses. Even though they didn't say it in Exodus chapter 6, they remind him in Exodus chapter 14 of what he said, of what they said to him. In Exodus chapter 14, verse 12, when they're standing in front of the Red Sea and things look terrible and the Egyptians are behind them coming to get them, he says, is this not the word that we told you in Egypt, saying, let us alone that we may serve the Egyptians? For it would have been better for us to serve the Egyptians than we would to die in the wilderness. So when you came to us and you said, God is Jehovah, we said, get out of here. We're good. We'll just serve the Egyptians. Leave us alone. We want to serve the Egyptians. And they were done with Moses because Moses had gone and tried something and then things had, quote unquote, gotten worse. So they were done. We don't want to be that way. So it says they responded to it because of anguish of spirit and because of the cruel bondage. Verse 10, says, and the Lord spoke to Moses, because Moses went to God and says, well, I told him everything you said. And they said, we're not having it. So the Lord, and so Moses was done too. Like, this is the very thing I feared would happen when I told you on the mountain, I don't want to go speak to those people. And you made me come down here, and now they're angry at me, which is what I knew would happen, and they're angry at you. So we need to just let it go. All right. And the Lord spoke to Moses saying, go in and tell Pharaoh, king of Egypt, to let the children of Israel go out of this land. And Moses spoke before the Lord, saying, now the children of Israel have not heeded me, so how then Pharaoh shall heed me? For I'm of uncircumcised lips. And he's arguing with God, who spoke to him out of a burning bush and almost killed him on the way in. He's arguing, and I just know that Moses is not peculiar. I'm sure. I was like, where in my life do I argue with God? I tried it this way, God. You go and then you talk to Pharaoh, and because I'm not going in. And you had me go, I told you, if you're God, why are you using me to do all these things? You're God. So, because he's frustrated. I'm just trying to do what you said, and the people, things got worse. And the lie is that if God's on your side, things only ever get better, 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 better. Well, they're getting better, but they may not look better to us. It doesn't mean things will always look like they're getting better. There are real people in the Bible to whom God said, I'm going to deliver you, and things got worse. So if anybody ever tells you, no, if God's in it, it's only getting better, let me tell you, spiritually it is, and that eventually we'll see the victory, but it may look worse for a time. So Moses is like, it looks bad. They're not going to listen to me. I'm not going in to talk to him because I'm uncircumcised lips, meaning it's like I have foreskin over my lips. I really shouldn't be talking. I'm not good at this. I told you I wasn't. Verse 13. Then the Lord spoke to Moses and Aaron, because Aaron's standing right there, and gave them a command for the children of Israel and for the kingdom of Egypt to bring the children of Israel out of the land of Egypt. So now he's commanding them. This is not something that you have a choice of. And I promise you that's the only reason they did it. Because God is now commanding them. So here's what happens next, and we'll get to this next week. There's suddenly a genealogy pops up. It just like God commands them, and then he says, let's start back at the beginning and give the whole genealogy. And you go, why is there a genealogy suddenly? Well, I want to read verse 26 and 27 because they start with Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, and all of his kids. And they start with Reuben as the oldest, and then Simeon, and then Levi is the third. And then they trace down Aaron and Moses' lineage. And in verse 26 it says, these are the same Aaron and Moses to whom the Lord said, bring out the children of Israel from the land of Egypt according to their armies. So I just he's wanting to identify for you, see their lineage, see how God spoke to Abraham and then Isaac and Jacob and all this, and see how they're from that line. This is that same Moses and Aaron who's now refusing to talk to God and listen to what God's saying. I just want you to be clear, because the other people you've named Moses, other people you've named Aaron, but I just want you to understand that these are the people arguing with God right now. So that's verse 26. This is verse 27. It says, these are the ones who spoke to Pharaoh, king of Egypt, to bring out the children of Israel from Egypt. These are the same Moses and Aaron. So, because he's expecting the hearers of the stories to be shocked at this point. I know you're thinking, what? He's looking back to God. Because Moses is literally telling God, no, not gonna die. Because I went and talked to the children of Israel, and they wouldn't listen. So why? And I already went into Pharaoh. Things got worse. You're not going to make me look at like the enemy of all time and have them, because those are my people. The Egyptians won't own me anymore, and my people. I've got to try to get back in with them. So you're not going to make me frustrate them and have them hate me. Sorry, God. So since God commanded them. So next week I'm going to go over that lineage because there's 3 very interesting people that come up in the lineage. Because even genealogies are interesting. They're all interesting. And there's 3 people that we have to look at next week. But the point of the genealogy is to say, Moses is part of this line. This is not some crazy person that God just met off the street. Hey, let me holler at you a minute. Okay, I want you to go down there. This is the descendant of Abraham. I can say Jacob, who's standing up to God and saying, "No, God, you know what you're talking about." So he says, "I just want to be clear. I don't want you to think that I'm crazy." Yes, this is that Moses and Aaron who are now arguing with God. So let's try to not be like that. When things get bad, let's still trust Him, because they just look bad to us because we had a plan as to how we thought it would work and how long it should take, and who should do what, and God had a different plan than us. So it may look bad, but doesn't mean it is bad. Okay, I'm done. Thank you so much for listening to this afternoon at 3 o'clock. And you don't have to, not. But there's a musical for my mother. She is going to sing in it, but she doesn't. Oh, she won't remember this. Uh, she's. But the musical is a musical of her life story. Musical of her that her children, grandchildren, great grandchildren are putting on. It's at 3 o'clock. Should I think it'll be on my page. It'll be on the Good Shepherd also page. So those of you who are not able to tune in and you don't have an hour and a half with nothing to do, then I will see you Wednesday, where we're going through the book of John. So again, thank you so much, and we'll see you Wednesday. Bye bye.